Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Breakthrough Blueprint. I am joined by Mason. If you want to give a quick little introduction about yourself.
Oh, sure. My name is Mason Harris. I am, like you, somebody who enjoys learning, or maybe I enjoy it more now that I'm done with college and graduate school, but it is a lifelong pursuit. I'm an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur, and I'm looking forward to this evening and learning about you.
I'm interested in learning about you too, man. So I guess first I just want to start off with you are a seriously accomplished individual. I kind of want to take it back to your childhood. Like, what was that like? What was your childhood like? Where'd you go to school? What'd you learn? Any passions? What was that like for you?
Childhood, boy. Okay. Let's see. Like so many of us, I come from a family of immigrants. So I don't have a long history, or my family doesn't, here in the United States. My parents actually came over in 1949. Uh,
Jeez.
I grew up in the it's really 60s, 70s, where it was my time. And I learned very early on that, at least from my parents' perspective, and from that of a lot of immigrants, America's a land of opportunity. It's not necessarily a land of entitlement. And there's a big difference there. Opportunity means you can work hard, you can overcome obstacles, but ultimately it's up to you to take advantage of opportunity that you have or to create your own opportunity. Entitlement is a very different scenario and thought process. It's
I think
not
that's
one
very
that I
true.
have, and I have a feeling that you and many of the students your colleagues also see this as an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, personally, from my parents' perspective at least, when their parents came over, they were this was like 40 or 50 years ago. They came to America, and I think both of my grandpas, they worked like for 3 years straight, just like 12-hour, 16-hour work days. They didn't get to see their families. They're getting very little pay. And I think a lot of people, when they think of America, especially immigrants in a way, they had this idea that if they go there, they'll be rich like instantly. But that's definitely not the truth. You have to really, really work. Everyone else is competing with you. I think that's like one of the good things and bad things because everyone's competing, like the quality of products in a way or the quality of candidates or services is going to be higher. But it also means you have to work your ass off like crazy. I mean, what were your like? How did your parent? What did your parents do when they came over?
Well, first they learned to speak English. They
Yeah,
actually met in night school learning English, and
really, that's pretty cool.
yeah, and I don't know if my father picked up my mother speaking Hungarian or if they were speaking English, but whatever it is, somehow it worked out. My father worked in a bakery, and my mother basically worked full time raising three kids.
Jeez, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. 3 kids. That's a lot. That's a lot of nonsense.
I don't know if it is or isn't anymore. I don't know what the average is in the States. We might be under two per family now. I believe,
I actually wonder if it's like two for. I feel like it's two per family now. It has to be.
yeah. So that's replacement value. When you get to three, you're contributing a bit to the population. You get to one, that means you are not adding.
Yeah,
If anything, the population is diminishing with that birth rate. We can
yeah.
compare ourselves to other countries where the birth rates are much, much higher. But I think here our focus is more on quality of life rather than number of offspring.
Yeah, I don't know how it feels like we're very overpopulated in a way. It's hard to fathom that. I think my dad said there was 3 billion people or 4 billion people when he was a teenager, and now there's like 8 billion, which is ridiculous to think about. I don't know how we're even surviving right now. It's weird to think about that. There's 8 billion people. There's a billion people in China and India alone. It's weird. It's really weird to think about. But yeah, continue what you're saying. Sorry.
Oh, no, 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 please don't apologize. I like hearing your side as well,
Of
because
course.
that stimulates some thoughts. Uh, yeah, in some ways things have gotten crowded. You're in the DC area now. I grew up in New York City, in
Yeah.
Queens. So I was accustomed, especially when I went into Manhattan, to crowds and people walking side by side, pushing
Yeah.
by each other. You learn to ignore what might seem to be social issues in terms of personal space, because there was little personal space, none actually, if you were on a subway during rush hour.
Yeah.
You were just crowded in like a sardine, is the best example I can give.
It feels like it's everywhere now, even at the train station, at the airport station, bus station. It's so crowded. I mean, I think I look at the like for our school specifically, the undergraduate classes have just been getting larger and larger and larger and larger. I honestly don't know how, like, I don't know how sustainable it is in a way. I feel like at a certain point we're gonna reach like that sustainability level where we can't go any further. I really don't know what's gonna happen when that, like when we hit that, what do you think will happen?
Well, it's an interesting thought. We have proven that we can move a lot of our curriculum across and provide it on the web in real time or on demand. People
Yeah.
can see lectures. So, in a way, by creating larger classrooms that are live, but still providing the opportunity to get the same educational content online, is the market going to change considerably? The demand for an increase in online learning started way before COVID.
Yeah.
COVID just brought it all to the front from elementary school up through graduate programs. All types of courses were
Yeah, I did like
online
Coursera
subjects.
courses and stuff. Like all the universities were offering. I even did like an entrepreneurship course from Wharton. Like it's so cool how much information is actually out there right now. I know that specifically for what we're doing now, we're starting like an investment club. We were able to learn so much about investing in like a month's time when it would have taken us like 5 months or something to go to a regular class and learn about it. It's crazy. I mean, have you used Coursera at all like lately, or have you used any of those kind of courses?
Yes, of course. I even have a series based on my book that's available through a business site. So I believe in the value of on-demand learning.
Hmm.
It'll be interesting to see long term how, even though you may be learning things more quickly, what's happening to the social side. Are people developing relationships? Are they getting rejected in person? That's a normal function of life
Hmm.
and still bouncing back from it. With everything online, all of us really hidden from each other, chance for tremendous anonymity. You can sit through a class an entire semester and nobody knows you're there because you never say a thing,
Yeah.
raise your hand virtually or anything.
Yeah.
You've been in the same class. Does that improve your chances of getting a good job? One that requires you to work with people or be managed? It's going to be interesting to see what happens with a lot of jobs over the next several years, particularly with AI.
Yeah, I think especially for computer science. So I'm a finance and computer science major, and it's like a general like joke now that computer science majors are just throwing away their major and picking something else. I don't. The one thing about computer science, about the AI thing, is that it can only write very basic code. It can't write like very high level stuff that like a senior computer science major would know how to write. That's the only reservation I have. But I think like we have to also consider this is the very beginning. I mean, AI just came out. This ChatGPT thing just came out. I actually was using it. I was using it earlier today to open up some e-commerce store, but it's just coming out today, and I really don't know what it's going to look like in the future. I mean, have you done what do you think AI will be like in 10 plus years? I mean, it really is crazy to imagine that you could just ask a robot or like a system any question on any spectrum or any conceivable platform, and it would know the answer straight away. That's ridiculous. It's half scary, half amazing. And I'm kind of wondering, do you think that like the advances of AI and these online platforms, do you think that's making social connections worse or better?
Well, first part of the question, what does AI provide us with? It's hard, I think, well, certainly for me to claim, oh, I think in 10 years it's going to look like this. I don't know. I'm learning the same as you are. Uh, I've discovered that for now, my searches for information, I'm defaulting more to ChatGPT than to Google.
Yeah, exactly. Same here, exactly.
And for me, Google was the major technological breakthrough of the century
Yeah.
because I could suddenly find answers to everything. Give me directions pre GPS, print
Mhm.
out directions from here to a restaurant in New York because I'm driving and I want to know which turns to make.
Yeah.
I can look up recipes. I can find the information I need for a paper, for other types of research.
Oh my God.
So Google has been, I don't want to say surpassed because it's still an extremely valuable tool and they're not going away quickly at all. But ChatGPT suddenly offers some very interesting alternative ways to search for answers.
I think so as well. I mean, ChatGPT, I know personally that students all across the world are using it. I used it plenty when I was like, when I was in school, and people are relying too much on it now. I know that for me specifically, I used to be able to do very complex coding fairly quickly, but now I'm resorting so much to ChatGPT that it's honestly kind of worrying how my development as an individual is worsening. I'm not being able to learn as much or as quickly, or I guess reach my potential because I'm using ChatGPT as like a crutch in a way. And
Mhm.
I think that's really while it's very amazing, I think that I don't know what to think about that honestly. Like although it's very fantastic, it's also detrimental to my progression as a student.
Well, and it does raise questions about how valuable will be even for a very good programmer, creative, innovative programmer like yourself. I believe there's always going to be work for you because there are always applications that are going to need your skill set. Always maybe is the wrong word to use, but in the near future, your skill set is still very valuable. You don't have a unicorn company in the Bay Area that's built without programmers who
Yeah, that's true.
work ridiculous hours or hours that fit their needs, but get the job done.
Mhm.
People who have ideas need them coded. Now, whether it's how to use Chat GPT and understand the coding they're providing, do some review of that code. Maybe that becomes a niche for some people who are in school learning programming today. I don't know, but there's still a serious demand for, in my opinion, for coders. Other areas that I don't think are going away are those that are require face to face. So healthcare.
Yeah,
Yes, we can do a lot of events, doctors calls through video, through a virtual meeting or exam, but the in-person exam is still necessary. Nobody's doing self-surgery at this point based
yeah,
on a video, on a YouTube video. Oh, I think I can get
yeah.
my appendix out. I just need to reach over a little bit more.
Just need to press this button. But what do you think about deep fakes though, in a way? Like if you're talking about face to face in a on a virtual setting primarily, like you have deep fakes that look exactly like people and talking exactly like people would. What do you think about that?
I think from my experience, seeing society that worked better together than we appear to be doing today,
Mhm.
there was more trust in government, even if you didn't vote for your leader, for the party that was in control of the presidency, for example. You still, on the whole, trusted that they had your best interests at heart.
Yeah,
That trust, I think, has been eroded. So these deep
definitely,
fakes, the
definitely.
video, the images that people can create are just going to make all of us that much more suspicious
Mhm.
of what pops up on social media, what pops up on the news. Although, frankly, for a lot of people, that's the exact same thing anyway.
Yeah, it's really I think our whole world is changing. It's kind of interesting to see how generation by generation we'll all experience like these big inflection points in technology or data. I'm like what you were talking about with Google. My parents were saying the same exact thing. How like the iPhone was like they thought that was gonna be it. That was like the maximum it could go. But now we're getting to the idea of like self-driving cars or self-landing rockets, like AI technology that can like you could be a deep fake one day and I could be talking to some fake like Chutzpah guy. Like I could be doing that one day. It's crazy to think about. And I don't know, I kind of want to pivot in a way because I want to get to your brand. What is Chutzpah? Like this whole brand that you have, what does it actually mean? Just kind of curious.
Okay, that's a great question. And the answer, although the word itself, and I pronounce it chutzpah, I've heard it pronounced chutzpah, chutzpah, as if the C isn't there. It just starts with the H, kind of like a stop sign in Washington, D.C. It's there, but I don't need really to
It's so
stop.
true.
It's chutzpah, because a CH can also have a K sound, as in the word character. Chutzpah, as in chia tea, or what is it? Chai tea.
Chai, there
Chia
you go.
pet. Chia pet, chai tea. So there are a
Chai
number of
tea is good.
pronunciations. The key, though, is, are people familiar with the concept? The word itself is Yiddish based, but I've run across other words in different languages that are pretty good synonyms of chutzpah. So if I do, you have a sense for when I talk about chutzpah or chutzpah? Do you have a sense for where I'm going with that? How would you define it?
The only reason why I know, like, I have a sense of idea, like, I would say moral compass in a way. And the only reason why I would think that is because I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, like I told you, and he like equated it to moral compass of like thinking. If it was like thinking and growing rich. If you think and grow rich, that's like a good husband because you're striving towards something very, very positive. But if you think truly and you truly desire like evil and pain, that's what you can desire, and that's what will facilitate and turn into reality. So in my eyes, chutzpah is what do you truly desire? Like, what do you truly desire as a person, and where you're willing to take those desires? That's what I view it as.
Okay, so if we add to that, do you have the persistence, the drive, the grit, the determination, the ability to overcome obstacles because they're inevitable to accomplish your mission? Then you have the foundation of chutzpah. Chutzpah has numerous synonyms. When I was researching my book, I interviewed people and I ended up with over 40 synonyms or descriptions of chutzpah, ranging from some of the words I just shared
Yeah.
with you. I can add gumption, which is
Gumption.
a word that somebody in Oklahoma actually used when I asked an
Discipline.
audience, a sales team of 60 people, who's familiar with chutzpah here. And in that case, only 3 or 4 hands went up. And
Really?
they
Yeah.
were pretty tepid with their responses because it's not a word that they're familiar with.
Yeah, I
But
don't think it's very well known. It's more like I've never really heard chutzpah until I started meeting you, and then I all of a sudden saw that in a book, but it's not that
well,
very common.
it is here in the East Coast, it is more well known than in the center of the country, for example.
Yes.
West Coast as well. If I'm in New York, doesn't make a difference where you're from, practically. Um, if I ask a crowd of people in New York, anybody here familiar with chutzpah? 90% of the hands will go up, and there'll probably be a couple of fistfights because that's New York.
That is
But they
definitely New York.
do have a sense of it. In the case of, I was speaking actually with somebody following a presentation, and this person said to me afterwards, we have a different word for that. I said, oh, where are you from? He said, Finland. And I said, what's your word? He said, sisu, Sisu. So I looked it up, and it's a Finnish word that came back with a lot of the same descriptions of chutzpah. So some of my favorites, or where I think a lot of it comes down to, is if you are willing to take risks, to stretch your personal boundaries, to accept that failure is inevitable, and you're willing to risk something, even though there's a chance you might be embarrassed, humiliated, fail terribly,
Yeah.
that's already a good element of chutzpah. For me, after my research, I realized that chutzpah isn't a single word. Rather, it's a combination of skills, behaviors, or characteristics that combine to create a skill set. And getting to what you said about a moral compass, a skill set can be used in almost all cases for positive purposes or negative purposes. For example, you're a coder. If I was a coder, two of us might go to the same classes, graduate with honors. You might decide to use your skills to create applications for businesses, to make businesses run more efficiently, to get a manufacturing facility up and running in a way that makes more sense. So your coding helps people. I might take a very easy way out and say, with this, I can break into people's computers. I can create ransomware.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who do
So,
that too.
right. So the skill set of coding isn't good or bad by itself. It's the moral compass of the person who's using it. Same with a locksmith. I can learn locksmithing and open a shop and help people when they have problems because they've forgotten their keys, a lock is jammed or broken, whatever. Or I can use that to break into people's homes
Yeah.
because I now have that knowledge, that skill set. So chutzpah, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about it, in my world is 8 key behaviors and characteristics. There might be more synonyms that I don't cover, but I consider them to underlie all of this. So, for example, people have said, do you consider courage as part of chutzpah? And I say, yes, although I don't discuss it as part of those 8 key behaviors and characteristics, for the simple reason that courage underlies all of this. You can't do any of it if you don't have at least a bit of courage.
Yeah, I think the
You know,
courage is a big part though, because most people aren't really willing to take that leap. And I was actually kind of curious about, you mentioned the example of coders, right? How one coder can be doing something very fantastic, one can be doing something very, I guess, negative in a way. What determines that separation between the two? Like, is it genetic? Is it like a nature versus nurture type of conversation? What determines what path they will take?
well, let me give you a story. 2 businesses in New York City. These are actual businesses. The first was founded by a very enterprising young man. He did not grow up in the best neighborhood in New York. Matter of fact, his education was pretty poor. Frankly, he was street educated, which can provide a tremendous amount of value growing up in a
Yeah,
very crowded city where
definitely.
people don't always respect the rights of others. He was working since his early teens. By the time he was, I think it was 18 or 19, he was clearing $2 million a year.
Wow.
Yes.
By 19? That's like
Yes.
0.001% type stuff.
Now, the problem is he was a drug dealer.
Oh,
He
there's always a
learned
piece of
drug
catch.
dealing on the street
Yeah.
and he realized, there's a better way to do this.
You can apply that to somewhere so much better. Like you can become a very successful business person.
He he did, and he realized that there are issues with the idea that customers come to a destination, a street corner, a phone booth, because at the time people were operating out of phone booths, public phone booths. I don't know if anybody in your generation knows what I'm
I
talking about.
I've
Okay,
seen them before. I've seen them
okay.
before.
So, but the thing is, they'd come to a street corner, and the transaction would be held there. He said, "Well, this is kind of crazy." Um, it puts me in touch with a lot of customers who I really don't want to deal with
Mhm.
or be face to face with. And it makes it so easy for police surveillance to basically capture all of us on video and have the evidence they need for a trial. So he decided he was going to create a business that provides a delivery service. And his target market was going to be white collar users.
Yeah. Oh,
And
white collar. Yeah.
and it worked out well because they could send the text, have somebody meet them elsewhere or even at their apartment or even their place of work in some cases,
Mm.
exchange the money and the drugs and be on their way. And they were less likely to get into a dispute as to, hey, last time you shorted me, I'm taking more. You didn't have the types of problems that the typical drug dealers were having.
Mhm.
Now, the sad side to this is at 19, one of his guys was basically apprehended by the police
Mhm.
and turned on him. I'm not saying this part is sad because there is a justice system in this country. And when you break the law in that way, you should count on at some
Yeah.
point or another paying your dues.
Yeah.
He was sentenced to 7 years in jail.
Okay.
He had just had a child, a son.
Oh my God. 4?
And he told himself that he would do anything he needed to survive in jail because he would come out and be a good father to his son.
Mhm.
Okay. So he had a purpose when he went in. The other thing that's interesting is that he was about 70 pounds overweight when he went into prison.
So I'm assuming he
Doc-
got crazy to shape when he went there.
Yeah. And the doctor told him that's going to be your biggest threat to survival. Let's move on now for a moment to the second business. Second business, if we think about health clubs and the health club industry in this country, do you belong to a health club or do you use the facilities at your school?
I don't, but I go to Equinox, so I use
Okay,
those.
so you go to Equinox.
Yeah.
So Equinox, LA Fitness, we can probably name half a dozen of the major providers, Orange Theory, Soul Cycle, that have raised large amounts of money, of capital to build and expand their businesses around the country. Well, this business person decided, I have a unique way of training people. It's proven. I think I can do a really good job. So he did. He opened up a single location. And instead of being squashed immediately by the competition, whose ability to use whose ability to use the funds they had access to for marketing, for equipment, for beautiful facilities that were constantly being upgraded, he didn't have any of that. And yet he created a successful single location business. So I think to myself, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm writing a book. Boy, I'd love to go to New York and speak with this guy
Yeah,
who
definitely.
built the gym. The guy who built the drug dealership,
Yeah.
the drug dealing business, not so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know that I'd want to be across the table.
Yeah,
Who
probably not
knows?
best friends with him.
Right. So that was my thought. But then the real interesting thing is it's the same guy.
Oh
And
wow.
he got out of prison. Well, I remember I said he was 70 pounds overweight when he went in.
Oh yeah.
When in isolation, he didn't have access to weights or anything beyond his own body weight, the steel bunk, the steel toilet, the steel sink. And he created an exercise program for himself
That's ingenious. Yeah.
and diligently did it every day because there was very little else that he could do anyway.
Yeah.
And by the time he got out and went back into I guess, the main prison area, he was a different person. And people looked at him and said, the hell happened to you? Can you show me how I can get into that type of shape? So he started training other inmates. Good behavior and some good fortune. He served his time. He got out. And again, his purpose was to get back to his son. He wanted to go legit. And it's very difficult for felons upon leaving prison to get legit jobs. There are few employers who are willing to try them. There's always some fear that what kind of liability do I have if something happens between this employee and another employee, or this
Definitely.
employee and a customer. So, unable to get a job, he used the same skills he used to create his first business. He thought to himself, well, maybe I should open a gym. But he couldn't because nobody would lend him money. So he said, well, how can I give lessons in the parks around here? So he created business cards and he went after what he called his target market. So this gets into marketing.
Yeah.
Most likely person to respond to what I'm offering. And he decided they were women in yoga pants that he'd see on the street.
I was gonna say the same exact thing. The same exact thing. Those are the type of people who would pay for those type of courses.
So he would give them the cards and he would have regular class times in a park. Park didn't cost him anything, and people would pay $6 or $8 or $10 or maybe more to be in the class. Some people, of course, hung out on the fringes and then ran away before they could pay. But on the whole, he made enough money at this and created a business that he decided once again to pursue opening a gym.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You should make like is that I hate to make like $1,000 off of that or more.
depending on how many people he got, but also this is a person who's persistent, who's bright, who is creative,
Yeah.
and thought that, look, there are all sorts of obstacles. It's so easy for me to end back up in prison, but I'm not going there. So what can I do? How many hours? I don't care what it takes. I'm going to be here for my son. All right. So he ends up finding that there's now a program from lenders who are willing to work with ex-felons and open a
Oh,
business.
I see it. Yeah.
He used that money to open the location, which coincidentally happened to have been on the same block where he first started dealing drugs. Now, this
Went
guy's
full
in New York.
circle.
Yeah. The name of his company is Con, as in C-O-N, Body. He has a TED Talk, a website, it's a book. It's really a fascinating story. But now let's get back to your original question. Why do some people use it for constructive purposes or good purposes? Others use it for bad purposes. The same skill set. All he knew in terms of Well, I'm good at speaking to people, at thinking outside the box, at hustling, at overcoming obstacles, about thinking how to solve problems. I'll be perfect in this drug dealing business because he really didn't have the opportunity to get
Yeah.
hired, right? He was doing this in middle school and high school. He didn't really
So
have the
the
opportunity.
opportunity was it like did all he know did all he know was drugs? Was that like all he knew? Like was that he was surrounded by that for so long and so often that his mind instantly went to that business model. But do you think it would have been a different story if he grew up somewhere else and had those same skills? If he grew up around let's say a community of gym goers, would that have been like would his chutzpah
I
gone better?
believe, yes, I believe 100%. He developed as a child or growing up. He learned how to make decisions. He learned how to think one or two or even three steps ahead. Had he not been in that circumstance, surrounded by other poverty, neglect, poor education system,
Yeah.
who knows how he would have gone. Now, people say, okay, so you've got the guy who started out bad and became good, and he had chutzpah, and I see where it worked in both situations. Has it happened in reverse? So, in the news right now, or very recently, and actually for the last couple of years, Elizabeth Holmes is no longer living at home. Now, a lot of people in your audience is probably going to be thinking Elizabeth Holmes. That name is so familiar.
Yeah, she's seriously familiar. I don't know. I feel like I know her, but I don't know her.
Okay, Elizabeth Holmes started a company called Theranos.
Oh my, wait, is this the person who did that fake like treatment thing that would take your DNA or something like that and give you a fake result?
Yes,
Did
she
she did she have like a fake deep voice too or something? She faked a deep voice for like her whole career.
that I couldn't say, but
That's
basically
crazy.
a
I completely
bright,
forgot she existed.
bright Ivy League student who had the education. Now, when she started her business, when co-founded it with some others, uh, she had a great idea, a blood test that would be quicker and diagnose more blood type diseases or issues way more quickly and cheaply than the current technology. That was the business plan. That's what they pursued, set out to do, but they could never get it to work as well as what was out there. But at this point, they'd raised a lot of money. And they
Mm,
also had signed
pressure was building.
contracts with major distributors, retail distributors around the country to set up blood testing centers for Theranos
Mhm.
and send the blood away. They were actually taking samples, getting
Well, they
samples
were
back.
actually they were like doing the actual samples. It wasn't just like
Yeah,
yeah,
they
we're thinking like actual customers too, and that's what the big problem arises because these customers think they're getting this crazy treatment, but it's just a bunch of bullshit. Is
well, yeah, they thought that, oh, I'm going to get a diagnosis. So what was happening is they were misdiagnosing.
oh my
They
god,
were defrauding investors. Um, I can't tell you what happened to any of the patients, but I can imagine that with a great number of them, something bad happened to some
yeah,
of these patients somewhere.
getting
Sadly.
misdiagnosis. That's
Right.
crazy to do to your patients. That's
Okay.
crazy.
So again, somebody with the skill set that started with the intention of, I'm going to do a groundbreaking, differentiating technology that is going to provide so much value to the world. But when they ran across a significant obstacle, instead of saying, we're going to have to put the brakes on this, we're going to have to be honest with our board of directors and our customers that our development has slowed. We no longer have that time frame. We wish we did, but we can't proceed because the technology just isn't there yet. That was one option.
Yeah,
And they probably would have lost their jobs and their seats and their high salaries. And of course, the $9 billion valuation for the company would have dropped to a billion, but she wouldn't be serving an 11-year sentence in jail now.
yeah,
So the idea that you do what you know, and that creates the ethical side, these stories, I would argue, would say, no, that's not the case. Because the person who grew up surrounded by poverty and a lack of opportunity started in potentially the business that he knew because he was hired to run drugs as a young kid. Who was going to stop the 12-year-old, for example?
yeah.
His name, by the way, is Cos Marte. So
Mhm.
for any of our audience that's curious, Cos Marte, Google him, Google Khan Body, fascinating story. It has nothing to do from his perspective with chutzpah. But when I
Yeah.
heard the story, I realized what a great illustration of how this is really a skill set that can be used for constructive or destructive purposes.
Yeah.
And the Theranos story is one that shows the other side. Another example, you're familiar with Bernie Madoff since you're in finance?
A bit, yeah.
Okay, so Bernie Madoff ran the largest Ponzi scheme known to man.
Yeah, I could have sworn he was a big scammer. That was like the biggest thing about him.
Well, because we focus on the end of his story, $65 billion raised under false pretenses.
I just don't get how these people get away with it for so long, especially with Elizabeth Holmes, for example. Some of these people must have been like, "This is so fishy." They're saying I have this when I obviously have this. Like, I just wonder how this goes unnoticed. But I guess that's besides the point.
Well, the other question people have said is, why did people keep investing in him?
Yeah, why do people keep going with it if they knew it was obviously something going wrong?
Because people may have suspected, but when other people had a 3 or 4 or 5% return, he had a guaranteed 10% return. Month after month after month, the statements he sent his clients showed an increase in their value,
Oh,
funds they invest of 10%. Now, a Ponzi scheme, basically the definition of that is that I raise money from you and 100 of your friends, and I promise you a certain return or above average return. Well, how am I going to get that to you? Well, the last 50 people in that 100, since I'm raising that money after I've gotten the first 10, 20, 30 people, I'm going to use the money I have from them, take a small piece of that to pay the return I promised you. You're
mhm.
probably not going to pull your money out because you see your account growing.
Yeah.
So as long as he's able to find other people saying, well, he's proven. I mean, in a very high position in Wall Street. Now, the interesting thing there is when he started his first company, it was completely legit. It's when he hit obstacles related to changes in the rules and regulations and how penny stocks would be traded and priced. His margin took a big drop,
Mhm.
and he was never able to replace it. Over time, that grew to, well, why don't I pay these customers? I'll get this under control sooner or later. But for now, I'll pay these customers a return based on the money that I'm getting from new investors.
Mhm.
Well, by definition, at some time, a Ponzi scheme can no longer bring new investors in, and the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just kind of curious. These examples, they seem for me, I know that I personally seen a lot of examples of chutzpah in my own life. I mean, there's definitely been a lot of times where people I see have so much talent, so much gift. Like there's people who could code effortlessly, but they use those skills for things that really don't do them well. I know this one guy who had such a really good take on marketing and sales. And instead of using that to like create his own commerce store or business or store, he instead used it to scam, I think, 100 people out of like $1,000, and he made like I want to say $70,000 profit off of just scamming because he was so good at sales. And one thing I'm curious about is that for a lot of people out here who are just everyday people or friends who see these examples of chutzpah in their own lives where people are so talented and people have so much potential in front of them, or even themselves who are so potential and talented. How can you self-inflict that change in chutzpah or that change in direction? Is that even possible, or does it have to be an external event?
Here we're getting, I think, into psychology and, as you said, a moral north compass. What what is what is it in your ethical framework that guides your decisions? So as far as somebody who goes out and purposely scams, aside from being very short-term thinking,
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
very
so
high
much trouble.
very high probability they're not going to get away with it.
Oh, he did it.
Um,
Yeah, he did it.
the repercussions are pretty significant. Now, since chutzpah is a lot also about taking risks, I can see why people might skirt the rules and regulations frequently. And actually, when we get into the 8 characteristics and behaviors of chutzpah, I'll have a good example of a company that you and I can guarantee every one of our audience members is very familiar with, and how in some small ways, okay, small is a subjective term, it's not objective, they also skirted the rules in the industry they were in, and yet the results ended up going well. They didn't break any significant laws, but they were kind of on the edge in some ways.
Yeah. You want to give I guess one of those examples?
Oh, well, sure. Let's first, I mentioned that I have 8 key behaviors and characteristics for chutzpah. So the word chutzpah has 8 letters. Let's think of it as an acronym, and each of those letters stands for a different key behavior and characteristic. So we'll go through those. You'll ask questions, and I'll have examples of how it works. So let's start with the C at the beginning of the word. Before telling you what that characteristic, what that behavior is, you're familiar with the brand Nike.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember what their slogan is?
Just do it.
Just do it. Okay. Just do it is about move ahead. Stop thinking about it. Stop weighing the positives and the negatives. You've done that already. Go ahead and do it. Now, they applied it to the idea that be the athlete you can be.
Yeah.
You take that and say, be the person you can be, pursue your dreams. Well, that idea of just do it is as old as humankind. We won't go back to the beginning of the cave person era, but back in the days, do you ever take Greek by any chance?
No, I do not know.
Okay. Well, there's a Greek phrase, carpe diem. Do you know what carpe diem means by any chance?
Nope.
Okay.
Can I take a guess?
Sure.
Is it just do it?
It's close. Carpe diem actually stands for seize the day. Basically, the day is in front of you, the opportunity is in front of you, life is in front of you.
Yeah.
Seize it. Don't let it just happen to you. So carpe diem, I consider seize the day, seize the opportunity, is about the realization that somebody with chutzpah is more likely to go after what he or she wants, as opposed to wait for things to happen. More likely to put themselves at risk to stretch personal barriers. So, are you familiar with the show Shark Tank?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so I kind of joke about difference between somebody with and without carpe diem. Without, they're sitting in front of their TV, eating their bag of Cheetos and drinking their orange soda and watching, and then going, "Oh my God, I had that idea 6 years ago. This guy just raised it." And
I'm so scared of that. I really like all the ideas I have. I make sure to write them down because I'm so terrified that one day the idea that I have is worth like tens of billions of dollars. I just didn't do anything about that. That's such a big fear of mine.
Actually, you're doing a couple of good things. One, you realize that at some point, if it's a really good idea, you have to act on it. And
Yeah.
two, you've gotten to the habit of writing it down, which is critical because we all have ideas during the day. It could be related to a business meeting coming up, an idea for a product enhancement, a new product, a company. If we don't write it down, we are very likely to forget it at some point, especially if we're filled with ideas,
Definitely. Yeah.
as it sounds like you are, and I imagine a lot of your audience members are as well.
Yeah,
So,
I know that for me personally, it happens so randomly. Like I'll just be in the shower even then, and I'll just get the idea that I like make sure after my shower, just make sure I write it down and put it somewhere because I can't emphasize that I'm so scared of just like one day realizing that I had the potential to become like a trillionaire, a billionaire, whatever the heck. But I was just so lazy that I didn't do it. Like that is such a big fear of mine.
well, when you become that, you don't have to be a trillionaire, but a billionaire, please consider me as a personal assistant.
I will. I'll make sure to hire you. $1 billion a year.
Well, no, you keep a good portion for yourself.
We'll split it 50-50, 50-50.
Okay. So the idea behind carpe diem is something that I have a feeling you do regularly. From what I saw of your profile, you have taken leadership roles and co-founded multiple student groups,
Yeah.
mostly business related, but some not business related. You've also done some work that I would consider to be for philanthropic organizations.
Yeah.
Basically, okay. So I have a sense that you are somebody that carpe diem, if something strikes you, sure, you may write it down because you can't get to it right then, or you have so many things on your plate, you'll get back to it when the time comes. But you go after things. You have an idea for a good student group, one that there's a void in campus, and you think that there are a lot of students that would benefit and be interested in what you're proposing. You go and you do it. Well, it's the same with starting a company, applying for a job. I spoke with another college group not long ago that was very concerned. This was towards the end of COVID, that one, they'd missed 2 years plus of their classrooms,
Yeah.
but they were still graduating, and they thought, how am I going to find a job? You have all the people who've been out a year or two who were in classrooms who are still looking for jobs. I'm looking for a job. What am I supposed to do? I guess I'll just put my name on a job board and see what happens. That's the lowest level of carpe diem you have. I'll put my name on a job board.
Yeah.
Highest level is I'm going to put my name on this job board, but I'm also going to reach out to all of my professor's colleagues or generate referrals from friends, from colleagues, from family. I will find opportunities on the web. I will register with every large recruiting service so they have my resume in their background. I'll make sure that I've done my SEO correctly so that if I'm looking for a particular type of job and I know the words that companies are using to find qualified candidates, that's sprinkled throughout my resume. That's carpe diem at a higher level.
Hmm. I mean, how do you think people can, I guess, is the, I guess, degree or intensity of your carpe diem, is that something that you're born with, or how do you like, how is that changed in a way? Like, let's say, for example, the people who are applying to two jobs, the one person who doesn't really do too much, and the one person who does a lot. Is that difference mostly based on their desire for the job, or is it based on some like genetic psychological thing that happens in their brain? What really determines that intensity?
I'll give you the easy answer, which is what psychologists say for this
Oh,
type of
thanks.
situation is it's both.
Oh, okay.
However, there are people I've run across who said to me, look, I'm an introvert. I don't want to be the leader. I'm frightened about getting up in front of groups. I don't have chutzpah.
Hmm.
Okay. And I say, would you agree with me that chutzpah at some level is about stretching boundaries? And they go, okay. And I don't do that. So I'll say, okay,
Yeah.
let me ask you a question. When you were younger, or do you ride a bicycle?
Yeah.
And most of the time, the answer is, of course I do. I say, do you remember when you learned how to ride a bicycle? Yeah, kind of. You went from training wheels and riding by yourself because the wheel supported you to your parents or neighbors or friends or older siblings running behind you, holding the bike steady, training wheels off, and then letting go.
Hmm.
What happened? He goes, oh my God, I was terrified. Did you fall? I fell several times. Did you get hurt? Yeah, I hate to say it, I did. I may even have cried a bit. Okay, but you got back on that bike and eventually you mastered that skill of bike riding. So
Yeah.
yeah, and you still ride today. You don't even think about falling anymore. Carpe diem, chutzpah is the same thing. You stretch boundaries often enough, and that was an act of stretching boundaries. That was an act of chutzpah for this child who says, "I don't want to fall. I don't want to hurt. It hurts when I'm bleeding. I don't. Oh my God, I'm going to get sick. Mom, don't make me do this. Dad, you're being so mean." But they did it, and they learned. So we all learn at some extent from an early age how to stretch boundaries.
Yeah. I think we all do, but we lose that when we get older because when we start incorporating the idea of chutzpah in our lives, I think the topic of money is so sensitive. And when you think of like the risk of losing that, like that makes you just go ballistic. You can't, the idea of not having a steady income fears makes people so fearful taking risks that they don't even try at all. And that's why I think it's so good to start young. And I guess like make sure that you have the solid foundation from which you can start from. Like for example, with the idea of riding a bicycle, I think that's so easy for people to do and wrap their heads around like that they did that. It's because, well, if they messed up, they can always get up and try again. And I think it's difficult for people to realize in their heads that, okay, let's say I start like a small venture by myself. It may go to shit and I may like go bankrupt everything, but you can still try again. And it's that persistence on a grander scale, on a more mature scale that I think intimidates so many people that we have this widespread belief that you should just stick to one job and not go anything beyond that because it's too scary in that unknown territory. But when in reality, I view, I guess, going to that unknown territory as the long-term solution. And a job is like a short-term solution in a way.
Right. Well, no sane person wants to fail. So the fear of failure keeps a lot of people from doing different things. I've seen people in companies who are much brighter and harder working than their bosses in small companies and should have gone out on their own years ago. But the fear of failing has kept them there.
What do
That's
you
why,
say to those people?
sorry?
What do you say to those type of people? Like, what do you like if you see that happening? Do you like what would you say?
That they, frankly, that fear, that failure is natural. We learn from our failure. Ultimately, they need to do what they're comfortable with. There's a well-known quote from, I'm saying it's well known, I don't know exactly, but I think it's from Thomas Edison, where he says something to the effect of, I found in terms of how he
Oh
invented the
yeah, I
light
heard about
bulb.
this.
Right.
Yeah.
And basically, do you remember the quote?
Wasn't it like I found 10,000 ways to not make a light bulb? The one time that I did was the only one that matters, something like that.
Exactly. So in essence, that's about failure. But he didn't look at it as failure. He looked at it as learning, as
Yeah.
experience that ended up creating the light bulb that worked. Without those 10,000 failures, he wouldn't have been there.
Mhm.
So that's what I say. Look, you're going to fail. We all fail. And it could be in personal issues, it could be job, it could be company. Um, you can take calculated risks. You can recognize that a lot of what happens is truly beyond your control at times. And you can also recognize that luck may play a factor in your success or lack of success. So luck might be something that comes up later because it actually fits in one of my chapters, and how luck impacts chutzpah.
I think luck is a bit different because I think that luck can be two sides of the same coin where if you have good luck, it's a reason why you just keep trying in a way, but if it's bad luck, it's a very common excuse in a way. I think that like if you're starting a business, right, you fail. But if someone else starts a business and they succeed, the common excuse is that, oh, it's just good luck. I had bad luck, they had good luck. So then therefore, if I'm a person who has bad luck, why should I even try at all? And I think that luck is it's a big crutch for a lot of people in a way. Because I think that's a very easy get out of jail free card if you just say, I'm unlucky, therefore I shouldn't try because I won't become successful.
Mhm.
I think luck is more so when you've done all the hard work and you meet that potential and the opportunity. That's what luck is. I think it can be created in a way if you put yourself in the right scenarios.
Actually, yes, I think you can influence your luck by putting yourself in a better position. But let me ask this question. Um, it's an obvious one. Is winning a couple $1 million in a lottery good luck?
I think I know where we're gonna go with this. Because if I say yes, you're gonna say, well, the people who win $1 million in lottery, they end up broker than they usually do before they started.
Some of them do, and that's actually a good point. You pay attention, without a doubt. There are people who have won good sums of money, enough to retire on, and they've invested wisely. So the good fortune, the good luck of winning a lottery, they leveraged into a stable environment for them and their families for the rest of their lives because they didn't do stupid jaunts to Vegas. They didn't buy a yacht that they didn't need. They elevated
Yeah.
their standard of living,
Yeah.
but they didn't go crazy. So they were able to sustain it.
Mm.
That's good luck that's leveraged to security. And then there are some people who had the good luck to win, and don't use the money well. They're buying gifts for people they don't know. They're responding to every hoax and fraudulent investor that's out there. Maybe they even fall into through boredom becoming heavy drug users,
Yeah. I think
which
that's
is
a very common thing to happen. Like
okay.
they don't know how to
So
manage their money, so they just throw it all away.
now, what about somebody who has bad luck to start? So let me think of a good example. Beginning of COVID. Let's think of the businesses that shut down.
Mhm.
If you had a restaurant in those early days, you couldn't open up.
Yeah,
People could
you
not
were done.
come anyway. So that's very bad luck. Okay. For some, it meant I can't pay the rent. I'm personally liable. There's personal bankruptcy, there's business bankruptcy. I'm done. Yet we know of a lot of businesses that had to pivot, change course, in some cases dramatically because of COVID. So in the restaurant industry, you had some operators that said, this is crazy. I have a team of colleagues, people who've worked for me for years. They're like family. Can't just let them go. Let's put our heads together. Let's come up with something.
Yeah, I was gonna say that because so in your mind, would you think that the degree of luck or if it's good or bad is that determined after the event happens in a way? For example, like with the person who wins the lottery, like do you think someone who after going broke after winning the lottery, would they consider that winning the lottery good luck or bad luck still? I really wonder because I feel like they would say that was bad luck in a way.
If they did well with it and they leverage it into security, they'd say, boy, I was so lucky. I won the lottery and then I got good people to manage my money, my family's secure, I'm secure, my kids' college educations and graduate school, if they go, are all paid for. One of the most fortunate things that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
If they ended up losing their friends, you have people committing suicide when all the money's gone, or when their friends leave them because they realize they had no friends to start with. They
Yeah.
were attracted to the money. So, yes, getting back to the restaurant situation, those restaurants that increased their delivery service and said, we have cooking kitchen facilities, we have employees with cars. Let's see if we can start delivering
Mhm.
on our own. Some of those restaurants, well, some of those restaurants survived. Some of them, the percentage of delivered food became so high that even when they reopened their restaurants themselves, and there was a lack of manpower, there was a shortage of labor, they were still able to offset it or more than offset it because they still had such a big delivery business going, and they could run that now through one of the delivery services, Uber Eats, any of these other services that really blossomed because they were either they saw that opportunity, there's going to be more home delivery, we should create an organization, or they happen to be in it. Look at Zoom. I've been
Yeah.
using Zoom but way before COVID. But when COVID hit, suddenly Zoom became a verb. It's like it was no longer, it was so popular a brand, it's associated now with almost anybody going online for a virtual meeting.
Same with Google. Like you don't really say that I'm a search for it. I'm a Google
Right,
it.
right. So that's where good luck and bad luck, yes, we're all subject to it. And we can't always control what happens to us because of the luck of COVID, for example. But we are always in control of our response to those events. And we can choose to give up, we can choose to sit and wait, or we can choose to say, let's think of something. We've got a lot of bright, hardworking people here. We can figure a way out of this.
Definitely. Yeah.
So that's your carpe diem, and then we thrown in the luck side in
It's two
advance.
down out of eight. So let's get to the third one.
But luck isn't one of the eight. Luck is
Oh,
connected
really?
to one, right? It's one of those underlying things that I mentioned. Okay, so the H that follows the C. On a daily basis, say you have an idea and you say to somebody, I have an idea for a student club. Do you ever have anybody say to you, what are you wasting your time for? One, nobody cares that much. Or there's another club that does something like that. I'm not interested. Nah, I don't even think you should do it. Doesn't make sense. Do you ever have somebody who objects to your ideas, your thoughts?
Definitely. It's like they're trying to convince you to quit before you even start in a way.
Right. Well, basically, these objections happen regularly. They happen within families. They happen within colleagues at work. They happen when an employee with a bit of chutzpah sees that a decision that's coming down is the wrong way to go based on what they're hearing from clients. And they say, I have to respectfully raise this issue. I'm hearing this. I'm hearing X, you're telling me Y. I think it's premature to move ahead with Y because without at least exploring it further.
Yeah.
Okay. So in essence, the second skill set or the second characteristic of chutzpah is learning how to H, handle objections. Remember, C was carpe diem. The H now is handle objections.
Mhm.
And handling objections is about communication skills, carefully listening to what the objection is, making sure you understand it, repeating it back to the person so there's agreement, alignment as to, okay, just so I'm clear, this is the concern you have. So how do you handle it? Might be, well, if I can do this instead of what you think I'm going to do, would that alleviate that big concern you have, that roadblock? And if the answer is yes, you've handled your first objection.
Yeah.
We all learn to handle objections from a very young age.
You don't.
As a
Definitely.
toddler, it's real easy. Parent says, no ice cream now, or give me back that ice cream. No. It's as simple as that. That's how they handle objections.
Yeah.
We get more sophisticated as we get older in our objection handling. And objection handling also is a critical characteristic and skill when you learn about negotiation.
Definitely. I mean, I think in sales it's tricky because I'll see a lot of times in books where the author will say that they don't accept no as an answer. Like they'll keep going until they get that sale. But then other books I'll see, if they say no, then you find someone else who's willing to say yes. That's like the kind of dilemma that I'm personally having as well because I don't know how to approach that. On the one hand, I think that like pushing until you get them to say yes can be helpful. I just don't want my brand to be like that greedy salesman type of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so I'm a salesperson and I'm trying to sell dance lessons for a local dance studio, and I will not take a no from this couple, but I keep hearing no after no after no. Why? Because unknown to me, one of the people has arthritis and can't stand for more than a couple minutes at a time. So my approach of
Yeah.
pushing a sale on somebody who's not qualified is annoying. It's a waste of time, and it doesn't further my career, much less add value to the life of the people who I
Yeah, you're
take
not
note
adding
of.
value. That's a
Okay.
good point.
So the second option you mentioned, which is you hear no from a client, you have an objection. You try and handle the objection, you try and understand it. What you may not know is the reason they can't buy your service is because the boss's brother-in-law sells that to the company and they can't replace the brother-in-law. But
Yeah.
if you think that you're going to change it, you're wasting your time. So what you said is there are other prospects out there. There are other
Yeah.
qualified buyers. You reach a point where you say, this one isn't worth it.
Mhm.
I'm going to move on. I can always revisit it in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. I can send them information to stay top of mind, but you move on because your success never hinges on a single yes.
Mhm. So we have carpe diem, handle rejections. What is this next letter? What is this U?
I call it uncovering need, pain, and opportunity.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, Steve Jobs used to say with, for example, his products that people always say, hey, you need to find out what your customers need. His approach was, my customers don't know what they need until I design it. And they say, I want this, I need to have this. They're not even aware.
That's
So
an interesting concept. Yeah.
yeah. So there's the element of people express needs, but people always don't rush to fill that need. and buy a replacement product for it. Let me give you a good example. This is going back several years, but actually, even in DC, there are a lot of cabs on the street, right? But
Yeah.
there are probably 5 times as many in the days before ride sharing.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
so.
So you have the same number of cabs. You have metro buses. You have metro, the train station. You have limo services. Wherever you go in the world, there was an abundance of public transportation and even privately engaged transportation, like limo services, that
Mhm.
you could get for yourself when you need it. So there was no thought as to, I need another option. Do you know anything about the
Oh, I
founding
do know,
of
I
Uber?
know this story about the Uber guys.
Okay,
I've done my fair share of like digging into this Uber
okay.
stuff, Dakota
So
stuff.
the conceptual founders and original operating founders, Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, were
Mhm.
successful entrepreneurs who'd sold their companies. They were at a business conference in Paris. It
Mhm.
was winter. They leave the conference hall together because they're staying in the same hotel, figure they'll get a cab. They walk outside, and there's a blinding blizzard, a snowstorm. The streets are covered in snow. There are no cabs. You can barely see a car on the street.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. They think, okay, there's got to be a private car service we can call. Can't get through to them, or the cars are off the road, or it's too unsafe to travel. That need became painful both emotionally because they were stuck a couple miles away and dreaded the thought of trudging through snowdrifts to get back to their hotel.
Yeah.
And it was painful because they were freezing. And the more time they spent outside, the more it hurt. From that, the light bulb clicked, the brainstorm, and they realized there's an opportunity here. We have these phones in our pockets. Doesn't it make sense we should be able to order this? Forget the snowstorm side, but we should be able to order a phone from our phone, uh, uh, uh,
Yeah.
a,
Car
a
from the phone.
cab or car service from our phone. How do we build that business? So, like
That's an
you,
interesting
great
idea.
idea. Let's write it down and we'll get to it when we get back. Well, they did start working on it when they got back. And that led to the birth of Uber.
Yeah. That's it's such an interesting story as well because I feel like I know I heard this one story about the founders of Uber. They pitched it to Mark Cuban, and Mark Cuban like turned it down immediately. He said that it was a terrible idea, that the limos and taxes were gonna like ruin them. They weren't gonna be able to do it. But I guess that goes back to like your carpe diem in a way of just do it, just go through it. Then no matter what, just keep pushing it.
Well, you raised a great point. The stories about their efforts to raise money, capital, private equity, and the decks that they used. There was one company that I read about that they met with that was interested, intrigued by the idea. So they hired an expert. I think it was an economics professor from a well-known university to say, take a look at this business plan. Tell us what you think. Are these guys ever going to have $1 billion valuation, which
Yeah.
is what they claim? Of course, they're much probably
No,
close
they're
to
like
40 plus
crazy.
billion now, but will they ever have $1 billion valuation? Well, the professor, well educated, a broad thinker, supposedly, just like assuming I hadn't heard the Mark Cuban story, but trapped in his thought process, basically looked and said, you have taxi and limousine commissions. They're regulated in every city, in every country in the world. And there are plenty of them out there, and they don't want the competition because the regulatory authorities make money off of all this. It's one
Yeah,
reason
they
why
do.
fares were artificially higher years ago. You have in any city in the world different forms of transportation. You could get a rickshaw if you were in Asia and be pulled to your destination. You can get on a horse and carriage if you wanted to take the more romantic stroll or trip through Central Park in New York. But the point is, it was always there. His conclusion was that the entire industry right now is worth only $2 billion. That's
Mhm.
its that's what it generates. They think they're going to get half of it. I don't
Yeah.
think it's possible. This
In
is a no.
hindsight, it's crazy to think about because like I've used Uber so many times in DC, in DC going from like building to building, like if it's a 10-minute drive, it is so helpful. But looking back on it, it's hard to imagine that people wouldn't think that's a good idea. Even with
Yeah.
like DoorDash, I think that people in DoorDash also, when they were founding it, they turned it down because they said that these restaurants already have delivery options. Like you can already do this type of stuff just by calling them. But looking back on it again, it's interesting to think that because we DoorDash so much here too. Like it's crazy to think that we could not. I guess like I wonder what's cooking now. Like, what is going to be that new idea that everyone thinks is crap, and then it ends up being crazy successful?
Well, a couple of years ago, pre-Chat GPT, Elon
Yeah,
Musk
yeah,
was one of
exactly.
the owners, and
Yeah,
he sold before they reached their current stage. But Elon Musk is actually going to come in and under the next characteristic in a moment. But the uh, the uncovering need, pain, and opportunity is what creates transformational businesses.
hmm
It's easy for us to say, hey, I live in this small town. They don't have a single good Italian restaurant. I see a need here. Maybe there isn't pain because people say, well, we've lived this long without a good Italian restaurant. Maybe we continue, but they see a need. There's an opportunity. They open up the restaurant. They do very, very well. The Uber level is a different type of opportunity.
yeah,
That takes us to the T in chutzpah. And the word I use to describe that characteristic is trailblazer or trailblazing.
hmm
Uh, Elon Musk comes to mind. When we think of the varied companies that he has been involved with, many of them have been either, well, many of them have been on the forefront of new and previously unimaginable ideas.
yeah,
So
definitely.
he didn't found Tesla, for example, but he acquired a majority share way before people saw the opportunity in electric vehicles and the demand for electric vehicles. He was involved in the early days of several companies.
Wasn't he involved with PayPal too?
Yes, he was. Interesting thing is his first business venture occurred when he was a teenager, and he wrote some software and he sold it to a company for $500.
That's crazy.
And that got him into the world of, hey, this entrepreneurship thing works. And then I can't remember the name of the company, but he and his brother, their first major company together, replaced travel guides in hotels,
Yeah,
interactive guides. And I think they sold that for 20 some $1 million as relatively young men and kept half of it and invested the other half in their next venture.
like a not never ending cycle. And to consider where he came from as well, it's so remarkable how he was able to come from such a low place compared to where he is now to being the richest man on planet Earth. Is crazy to think about. So, in your mind, this trailblazing mindset, is that what determines because I think for right now it's very easy to get rich in a way that there's a lot of opportunities to make money now. Do you think that trailblazing mindset is what determines who is what separates the rich from the wealthy in a way, or the people who really make a difference in this world, or the people who they always say like there's like 100 to 200 people who actually shift the generation or improve it. Do you think it's that trailblazing mindset that really gets those people to the top 100, top 200?
You phrased that very well, actually, because I believe everybody has the foundation of chutzpah within them and will use it when they either feel pain and need to, or because they're pushed to stretch their boundaries. Somebody who decides to purchase a franchise or open a small business has chutzpah. Now, if you get a franchise, you're also buying into the model. They have strict guidelines and procedures and training as to how you're going to work, how you're going to present the brand to the public because you're part of a bigger brand.
Yeah, definitely.
But you still have chutzpah because unquestionably, the success of that franchise to a large extent on that local level depends on you, your ability to become a valued member of the community, to continue to offer quality. So they have chutzpah. However, they're not necessarily trailblazers. And I say necessarily because a lot depends on, as you also said, people start at humble beginnings.
Mhm.
So an immigrant who comes over and opens a Subway sub shop, a franchise, undoubtedly is a trailblazer, even though they're still working under the guidelines. But
Mhm.
to come to this country, to learn a new language, to say, I'm willing to put in the hours and my family will work alongside of me. We're going to make something really big of this. And then we're going to bring more relatives over. And maybe we'll get a second and a third store.
Yeah.
They're trailblazers. But when I was thinking of trailblazing and the Elon Musks, the Jeff Bezoses of the world, uh, I was thinking of having an idea that's so unique, so different. The founding of Google. There were search engines that were available, but nobody that did it as well as Google. Google identified areas in the market that people didn't necessarily say they needed then, but when they
Or even
saw
knew
it on
about, yeah.
Google, it was like, I'm not going back to Yahoo for a search.
Yeah.
I'm sticking with Google because they do this better. They're, so again, trailblazing can be at a smaller level. The person that opens up a franchise, it can be at the much larger level, the level that changes the lives of tens of thousands to millions to tens of millions of people around the world.
Mhm.
Those are electric vehicles. That's Google, a Chat GPT, and what that's going to do for the world. How it's going to help in healthcare. It's
Yeah,
going to
definitely.
help make us more efficient, more productive. Okay.
All right. I think that's a very good definition of trailblazers. So we have carpe diem, handle rejections. What was the U again?
Uncover need, pain, and
Uncover
opportunity.
needs and problems. That was and then trailblazers. So
And then
what is the
trailblazer.
Z? Not a lot of
So
words begin with Z, so let's see what this is.
that's right. This is going to be a tough one. Do you play video games?
I used to. I used to actually I did a lot, yeah, when I was
Okay.
like
When
16.
I was in graduate school, there was a game that was popular that today people would look at and go, graphics suck. There's no, I mean, it's how does this game work? And the the game was about a character that was being chased by other characters through a maze and could replenish itself and fight off its chasers, which were basically trying to destroy it
Mhm.
or eat it in the vernacular of the game. Um, or and if it succeeded and got through to the end, it could move to the next level. Does
Mhm.
this sound familiar to you?
It does, yes.
Okay,
Sounds like
it's a little yellow creature that moves along with
Pac-Man. There you go.
Pac-Man. Absolutely.
That's embarrassing that it took me so long to figure that out.
Okay, so Pac-Man, we're familiar with it,
Mhm.
and the concept is simple. And back in graduate school, I used to play it when I was working on my MBA. It was a way to spend some time, decrease the pressure of
Yeah,
a demanding
definitely.
graduate program. When I wrote the book, I needed to think of something that represented the ability of somebody with chutzpah to overcome tremendous obstacles. And that Pac-Man vision came to me, and I thought, Zigzag. That character
Zigzag.
zigzags around obstacles. It
Mhm.
replenishes itself. It gets educated. It gets a beginning job so it can get experience. It gets stronger, smarter, and better at each level,
Mhm.
faster. It trains. So I thought, what an interesting word to use here. And it represents exactly what I want, which is not just handling objections, but rather overcoming the really tough obstacles, the
Yeah.
constant, not, oh, I heard no from a customer, but rather, oh my God, I can't believe I've just heard no from 30 banks. What am I going to do to get my startup funded? What
How
are
are you gonna
the
pivot?
resources? Right? Sorry?
Like how are you gonna pivot in a way?
Right. How are you going to pivot? How are you going to find a solution as opposed to giving up? So, zigzag. I mean, actually, we can go back to Uber. I don't want to continue using that as an example, but we both spoke about how, in your case, you said Mark Cuban. In my case, I said this economics professor who told the PE firm, you need to pass on these guys. It's never going to happen. they needed to zigzag around these obstacles, and they did. They kept meeting with people. They kept growing their businesses somehow. Oh,
Mhm.
actually, this does reflect. This gets into one of the biggest obstacles they had were taxi and limousine commissions and politicians that did not want to provide them a license to operate.
Really, I actually didn't know that part.
Yes, they faced numerous obstacles here. So what they started doing in some cities to almost prove the concept was they violated the rules and regulations of the taxi and limousine commissions.
Mhm.
They put drivers out there that were not regulated by the TLC, taxi limousine commissions, um, and that was against the rules. And it reached the point where the fines, the taxi and limousine commission officials would purposely get on, hail an Uber, and then when the car pulled up, they'd give the driver a fine. And for these drivers, it's like, how am I in the midst of this? I'm just trying to earn a living. This is the
That's
best
so
way for me.
stupid.
$1,000 fine for violating this rule.
Mhm.
So what Uber, I'll say allegedly did, was create software where they were able to identify these people who were giving the fines because they knew what
That's
cell phones.
crazy. That is really crazy.
And then what would happen is if I was that taxi limousine commission official and I wanted to write another ticket to somebody else, I'd get on my phone and I order the Uber, and the response would be the driver will be with you to you in 12 minutes. And I'd wait patiently and I'd see that, oh my God, they're still 10 minutes out. I'd wait patiently. Well, Uber knew who this guy was and they weren't sending a car.
Yeah,
They would just,
so smart.
we can't let them know we're on to this. And then last minute they'd cancel the call and make them try again. Well, it's smart. And people would say, oh my God, is that what happened to that ethical and moral North Compass that we're supposed to have? Well,
Yeah,
these were in their minds, and trailblazers do this. People who zigzag
yeah. I was gonna say zigzag. Do that.
skirt the law uh, slightly. It's one thing to raise $9 billion from people or billions from people, create a valuation of 9 billion, start doing blood tests that you know are not providing reliable results.
So crazy.
That's different than, hey, we've got to prove this concept. If we can prove the concept, we'll get the investors we need. With the investors we need, we can start lobbying in City Hall and get the Taxi and Limousine Commission to make exceptions for us because they can see that their own citizens want this
Yeah,
service.
definitely.
It's desired. So it's a different approach.
That's a
That's
very
that's what the Z is about. Frequently, are you familiar with the book Chicken Soup for the Soul?
no, I'm not.
Okay. Uh, it was a book written by two motivational speakers. It's common in the book industry. Now we're into self-publishing, so it's very different. Anybody can get anything published. But back then, you basically had to go through publishers. They decided if they wanted your book or not. So getting turned down by a publisher was expected. The chances you're getting accepted was very, very slight. And you
Mhm.
made very little money off of it because they controlled the distribution, the marketing. You might end up with a small piece of the book sales.
Yeah,
You also had the risk because if they sent 1,000 copies of your book to a bookstore and 900 of them were returned, that came out of your commission or
Mhm.
your royalty fee. Well, the people who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul uh, were rejected, I believe, was by 139 publishers.
That's wow,
Yes,
wow.
before it finally got published. And that first publisher was probably scratching their head going, ah, what the heck? These are
Mhm.
really good. We liked reading it. Our readers liked it. Let's put them out and see what happens. Today, there are over 200 books that were born as a result of Chicken Soup for the Soul.
That-
All aimed at different book titles. So they're aimed at chicken soup for the teenage soul, chicken soup for the small business person,
mhm.
chicken soup for
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
right. So that's how they grew that. Actually, there's a book that I'm sure you have read, and probably everybody, or at least have seen the movies in our audience has seen about that little boy who's a wizard.
When you first said that, that's the first time that came to my head. Harry Potter.
J.K. Rowling. Uh, we read or are familiar with the story And let's leave the personality aside now, because there's some people that are angry with J.K. Rowling. I personally try to listen to her side, and
Yeah.
I'm not rushing to any judgments anywhere, but that's a different issue completely. But she was rejected by first 12 publishers. The
Mhm.
13th looked at it and said, I'll tell you what, let me give it to my kid to read. I have a daughter. Now, let me see what she thinks. The daughter came back and basically said, this is fantastic.
Mhm.
It's the best book I've ever read. Is there going to be another one? Is there going to be a sequel? And that led to the negotiations
That's
that
fantastic. Yeah.
led to the first contract for Harry Potter. And I believe it started with a relatively small printing of maybe 1,000 books that went to local bookstores in the United Kingdom, probably England, where she was at the time. I'm not sure exactly. Those sold out because of word of mouth. Every kid in school who had a copy came in excitedly going, you have to read this.
Mhm.
And if you hadn't read Harry Potter, you were the kid that was on the outside.
Yeah, definitely.
And 1,000 books became 10,000, became 50,000, became
Yeah.
1 million, to the point where each new book had millions of people worldwide waiting and counting down in stores till midnight when the book could officially be sold.
It's like
So
it's handling. I guess it goes back to the H in the way of chutzpah, handling those rejections. Just keep going further.
yeah, but this is more, this is zigzag. This is
Yeah.
uh, after how many objections do you say, maybe it isn't a good idea? Or do you say, they have it wrong? I really do have it right.
Yeah.
This story, everybody who sees it loves it. I will keep going till I find that person who agrees with me. If I'm Uber, I'll keep going till I find that first investor
Hmm.
that says, okay, maybe Mark Cuban told me no, but there are other people who have
It's a
Mark Cuban.
yes.
Right? So that's another example of zigzag.
So now we have carpe diem, handle rejections, understand problems and needs, zigzag,
Uncovering need, pain, and opportunity.
covering needs and pain points.
Right, that's okay.
And then we have zigzag.
Trailblaze.
Oh, I cannot spell. Trailblaze, then zigzag. What is this P? Let's get to this
Okay.
P.
I spoke earlier about Cosmarte,
Yeah.
the person who created the drug business
Hmm.
and
Yeah, no
generated a lot of temporary wealth for himself. Temporary
yeah.
because it all went away. Do you remember why he was so determined to get through prison?
Because he had a son, and he was also very overweight too. So
Right. The weight was necessary in some level to survive,
yeah,
because you don't want to be the guy that everybody thinks we're going to be picking on this guy in prison.
yeah,
And it was a secure prison. It was not one of the country club prisons that white collar criminals frequently go to.
yeah.
So his son became his purpose, as he describes it.
Oh, purpose.
P is for purpose. If we have a purpose, that purpose, and it's more than a mission statement. And we can also have a couple of things that are our purpose. Maybe it's our family. Maybe it's we'll work as hard as we have to because our family needs us. I
Yeah.
spoke earlier about immigrants that come over. You mentioned your family working 16 hours a day,
Hmm.
right? They had a purpose. And that purpose was related to my family needs me. I
Yeah.
can't afford to fail. So if I have to put in superhuman efforts to succeed, that purpose is going to get me there. Now, purpose applies on many levels. This is before your time, but interviews with American prisoners of in Vietnam after their release. There are interviews related to why some people survived and others didn't. And this goes back even further to the concentration camps of Nazi Germany.
That's interesting, right? Because they had a reason to keep fighting and keep going forward.
Yes, and there's a book called Man's Search for Meaning, one of the most difficult books I've ever read because the topic is so harsh,
Hmm.
but also one of the best books I've ever read and appears frequently on best books ever written. It's by a psychiatrist by the name of Viktor Frankl. He and his wife were picked up, and as Jews, they were sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp. And they promised each other they would do whatever they could, whatever they needed to survive so that they could reunite after the war. She unfortunately was murdered, killed, I guess, the way so many, the majority of those prisoners were. He somehow survived. And that purpose, that promise he made, was one of the things that kept him going.
Yeah.
But as a psychiatrist, he was also very curious as to everything around him. Who else was surviving day after day? And he said luck was critical, because if you had the bad luck to be selected to go to the gas chamber, there was nothing you could do. But if you had the good luck to be allowed to work yourself to death with starvation rations, but you were alive, which of those people had a better chance of survival? And he found another set of characteristics, purpose being the most important one of them, but there were others that help keep people alive. And little things like a sense of humor. The fact that there could be somebody at the end of the day with all the death, the trauma, the pain, the suffering around them, who could make people laugh in the bunks. It lifted people's hearts and souls.
Yeah,
Gave them the motivation to live. The beginnings of spring, to see grass come through what had been barren earth, snow-covered, frozen. The beginnings of spring and the birds also cheered people up. The fact that some people, as stark as the conditions were, as hunger-stricken as they were, would share their rations with somebody who was weaker and they were fearful would die of starvation if they didn't get something. So those are the types of experiences that help you get through the worst situations possible.
I can so see that happen. I can so see how that works in a way, because I guess if you don't have a purpose or why for whatever you're doing, you're much more likely to quit and give up on it, because there's nothing really propelling you to keep pushing and keep fighting for it.
Yeah, it's like if somebody's working for a startup, you have your founders, and maybe this is somebody who was hired to be the bookkeeper.
Yeah.
And the company's closing down. The founder might be doing everything possible to save it. The bookkeeper, who doesn't have this investment in it, whose purpose isn't tied to the success of the company, might think, no big deal, I'm a bookkeeper.
Yeah,
Job anyway.
They care.
Right. So finding our purpose is critical. It helps people get through very trying health situations, by the way. If you're alone and you have the bad luck to be diagnosed with cancer, survival is much harder than if you have a supportive family and friends who are by you saying, hey, come on, we're going to get you through this. You know that. Don't you give up on me. So that's the P.
So we have purpose. And what is this A? What is this A?
Okay. A is related to something that can be extremely difficult when you're in a position of authority, or even if you're somebody that has difficulty making decisions. Well, decisions are about ambiguity. The reason why people are hesitant to make decisions is because they want to be sure, or as sure as possible if they can't be 100% sure. That's about ambiguity. The A is about ambiguity minimization. The realization that to have chutzpah, you need to make decisions. Sometimes those aren't easy decisions. Sometimes the decision is, this is bad, but this is worse. I'm going to go with bad right now because I don't see another way out of it. And then hopefully, if we can get bad to work, maybe we can elevate that and get that back to tolerable.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Again, COVID, business is closing down. You know, it's bad for us all to take pay cuts. But what's worse is to lay everybody off.
Yeah. In a way, it's like going backwards to go forwards, what you say.
Right. So Jeff Bezos, owner of the Washington Post and Amazon and a couple of other large companies, many of us have probably heard of.
Yeah, definitely.
He has this decision model that he calls one-way versus two-way door. Now, a two-way door is basically easier decisions. The type of thing where if you run a small company and you buy your office supplies at Office Depot, and Staples comes and gives you an offer, you might say to yourself, I like Office Depot, but this is attractive. I'll go through that door.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, back out. If it doesn't work with Staples, I'll go back to Office Depot. Easy decision. A one-way door, however, is you're making a decision that creates a course for the direction of your company of 1,000 employees. And that decision is going to have repercussions that last for several years potentially. That one-way door, you can't budge, or is extremely difficult to go back through once you've committed resources. Once you've gotten your teams aligned, we're moving in this direction. Then it's like, oops, we made a mistake.
You
Well,
can't go back.
it's very difficult to go back. Now, he says that making decisions as an executive is tough, particularly difficult decisions. That's why teams, a founder will basically get the senior leadership together and say, okay, tell me what you think. And don't just agree with me or tell me what you think I want to hear.
Yeah. You don't want a yes man around you because that doesn't really help.
Yeah, I need you guys to fight this out. I have some thoughts in mind, but I need to hear every possible argument. Not only why we're going to succeed, but identify how this might fail and tell me how we can now prevent that because we thought of it. Okay, that's the A. That's ambiguity minimization.
I think that's a very powerful one as well. I think the idea of like the one-way door versus two-way door as a concept is a very interesting one because the one-way door is so intimidating for the fact that you have to be right in a way, or you can face catastrophic results. I think that's very intimidating for people. And I don't know. I personally I think even like, for example, choosing college, that's kind of a one-way door. Or would you consider choosing college to be more of a two-way door?
I'd call it a one-way door that you can pry open because you can always
I like that phrase.
Yes, you can always change, but it's a big decision. And when people make that decision, they pretty much commit themselves to it. Some people might accept an offer to go to attend one college with the thought that I'll be there a year and I'll transfer out. That's fine. That's their mindset going in. But most people, even if they've been disappointed because they haven't gotten into their first couple of choices, they make that decision. They're like, okay, I'm going to have 4 to 8 great years over here, depending on how long their parents will continue paying tuition. But the idea that I'm going to make the best of this. I may not have originally decided that this is where I was going to be, but this is the best place.
Making the best decision possible.
Make that the best place possible.
Exactly.
So yes. Now also Bezos says that too often in business, people treat two-way door decisions, the easy decisions, as if they're one-way doors. Why is that? Because they're scared of failing even at a small level. And that means that there's an absence of chutzpah in the company's culture. Right? If
That's
somebody
powerful too. Like treating a two-way door as a one-way door. I didn't actually think that could be possible too until you said that.
Well, that means I'm not going to make a decision till I'm 100% sure as close as possible.
Yeah. So
and
you wait until you do that too.
Frequently what happens is you don't make the decision on introducing a new product and you turn around and 2 competitors have already beat you to market.
Yeah, I think someone said this to me before, but it was like if you keep waiting until you're ready to do it, you will never do it.
Yes.
It's just you have to like just pull the trigger once you have the idea, once you get the ball rolling. Because
it's also the recognition that no decision is actually a decision.
Yeah, no decision is a decision
that says, I'm not capable of making this decision, so I'm gonna just see what happens.
Yeah. All right, so we have ambiguity, and what is this final letter H?
Final one. Are you familiar with a professor and author by the name of Jim Collins?
Yeah, I think I see some of his work. Yes,
he's written one of the best-selling business books of all time called Good to Great. And that's one of his many books. He was also a professor in Colorado for years. I believe he's a rock climber as well, an interesting guy. I've heard him.
Jack of all trades type of person, yeah.
And he's known for leadership and analysis of why some companies, good to great, why some companies do well, but others surpass them. What are those characteristics that do that? One of the things he speaks about is, not surprisingly, leadership. And you have different styles of leadership and different personalities of leaders. But in his studies, he says that one key element is a leader with humility.
Humility. Yeah,
Humility. So
I can see that. Yeah.
we think, oh, humility, that's that I want a tough guy. I don't want somebody who's humble. Well,
Mhm.
people are confusing humility with courage, with chutzpah. You can have
Yeah.
humility because that doesn't affect making the tough decisions. Humility is about sharing the credit when things go well, because you
Yeah.
recognize that it's your team that made it happen, but also accepting responsibility when things go badly. So there's an expression that success has 1,000 fathers and failure is an orphan. So that, oh, I was involved in the startup of Google,
Mm.
as opposed to, yeah, I was there when Theranos failed, one of my proudest achievements. Nobody wants to take credit for their role in Theranos. I was just an employee. Even the
Yeah.
leaders say, it wasn't me. We were getting pressure from the board, or
Yeah.
I
It's
was
always
getting
it
bad
pushes the blame.
information from head of development.
I think that stunts your possible development as well. Because if you can't accept a defeat or accept that someone went wrong and you're at fault, it limits how much you can learn from that situation as well. I think that people like if they fail in a big time company, they'll push it under the ground instead of learning from it and bouncing back in a positive way. They'll just be like, "Oh, that wasn't me. I don't have nothing to do with it."
Right. Well, also, it affects your ability to motivate colleagues and employees and teams and create loyalty.
Mhm.
If a success comes in and you get up and during that newspaper or a TV interview, you're talking about what a great job I just did introducing this product. When I came here, we were doing nothing good. We were losing money, but I turned this around by myself.
Mhm.
All your direct reports and everybody under them's thinking, well, for the last 3 years,
No
you've been
credit.
telling us about how we're in this together
Yeah,
to make this successful. Now you go on and it's all about you. No, that doesn't work for
that
me.
doesn't work.
Right. And by the same token, um, if something fails, that's where the excuses
That's
start.
someone else's fault. It's the developer's fault.
It's like, yeah, it's like, again, as we just said, hey, product was telling me this was going to be ready. It's not my fault. I'll get rid of everybody in product. I'll get rid of those leaders and I'll get rid of the other people who lied to me and who didn't do what they were supposed to do. But I'm the guy to keep running this company.
Yeah.
So, or a woman to keep running this company because we're equal opportunity here.
Inclusivity, yes.
Yes. So humility is that last one.
Mhm. Wow. I honestly, looking at Chutzpah before we met today, I did not think there was this much to unpack. There's so much wealth of knowledge within these 8 letters. Is it 8 or is it 9?
Hey,
8 letters. There's such a wealth of knowledge with these 8 letters. And honestly, I think that this word has become more important to me just because I feel like it encompasses a lot of ideas that other, I guess, phrases in a way will take in, like the moral compass of the world, like diligence, that kind of stuff. That's all encompassed within this chutzpah term, and I think that's very, very powerful in a way that it's very you can communicate about it very easily too, and just the fact that each of these letters could equate a word that was so well thought out, like zigzag. I would have never thought of zigzag in a million years, but it makes sense when you describe it. And really, I
the intention
sincerely
was to
appreciate taking
create
the
a
time to do
model
that.
that was memorable, that people could say, "Oh, I'm facing this issue. Which of those characteristics might work right now?"
Like, what should I pull on in a way?
Right. What should I focus on? So when I do the presentations of the workshops, I tell people, don't think in terms of I'm going to implement all 8 of these as soon as I get back to work.
Yeah,
I'm going to make sure my team is doing
yeah,
all 8 of these. No,
exactly.
focus on one, maybe 2. And then maybe the next quarter you add another one. But
Mhm.
get people thinking about carpe diem. You have a desk filled with paperwork. You have projects on your mind. Carpe diem. Seize the day. Get them done. You have ideas you've been holding off on presenting. You're not speaking up in meetings and we're looking for innovative thoughts. Carpe diem, seize the day. That's what we're going to focus on for the following quarter. And then the next quarter, maybe you're working on handling objections.
That's
So
seriously,
that's the way I suggest people use it.
that's great. Well, I think we have had a fantastic discussion, man. Seriously, I appreciate it so much. You've been a fantastic guest,
Well,
and really, like, I
I
think
thank
there's a
you. I
lot of
have
people.
one last thing I'm going to try and teach.
All right, let's hear
So
it.
this way, so that when you say the word, you'll be able to confuse even Yiddish speaking people. Chutzpah is not necessarily wrong, but I want you to try and say chutzpah,
Chutzpah.
chutzpah,
There you
like
go.
with
Chutzpah.
a ch, a ch,
Huh.
like you got something caught in your throat, a chicken bone or something. Chutzpah.
Chutzpah.
Okay?
Chutzpah.
And that way, when you go into a room filled with uh,
Yiddish people.
private equity professionals, and you tell them, "Look, I have chutzpah," they
I
turn around and look at that and go, "Ah, he speaks Yiddish."
He
So
speaks that stuff. He knows what he's talking about.
that's right.
All right.
I thank you
Well,
very much for this
now I will
opportunity.
be able to confuse all those Yiddish people. So I really appreciate it. If you want to promote anything, just say anything you're working on right now that you want to promote or let people know about.
Maybe when this one's done, we get this out there, you and I will have a chance to talk about something new that I think will revolutionize the way people communicate. And it's based on the idea that we know how important questions are. We ask questions because we need information, and we have a structure for asking questions. It could be the who, what, why, when, where, how, the five WHs and the W question. If we're really advanced, we can ask open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions. However, there has been little to no research on a model, a structure for the best answers to give, depending on the type of question that is asked. That's what I'm working on right now in a startup with a brilliant guy who's done the research on this and written a book. And this is called Answer Intelligence, or AQ. So maybe that'll be our next discussion.
Maybe so. Maybe when we make it big, I'll have you back on. We can talk about it more.
That'd be great. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of
And
course.
there is a book that I have that if people are interested in exploring this further, it's called The Chutzpah Advantage. It's on Amazon. That's actually the cheapest place to get it. As I think one person wrote as a joke in one of the endorsements, this book is worth everything you pay for it, especially if you sell it to a friend afterwards. So that's a good chutzpah explanation of the chutzpah advantage.
Well, I'll make sure to put that book in the link to the description, along with any socials that Mason may have. Again, thank you so much, man. And I think this is it. Thank you guys for watching. This has been a fantastic episode. We will have probably 2 or 3 more next week. So keep in tune with those. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Everybody have a good evening.